Yeah. Good evening. Welcome everybody here for a special edition of IMPAKT TV, the monthly talk show by IMPAKT Festival with its rotating series of hosts. Today, it's me, Friso Wiersum, and Rosa Wevers being your host for a dedicated show on music and algorithms, about which a lot more in a few seconds by Rosa. We'd like introducing our two special guests here, Christina Bauer on my left-hand side, and a bit further on my left-hand side, Wilbert Mutsaers. Much more on you and on the topic of the show in a few bits. I thought we agreed you would be doing the content part.
For sure. Tonight we will talk about music and algorithms. What is the role of data and AI in our music experiences? How do algorithms generate recommendations? And how have streaming platforms changed the music industry? These are some of the questions that we will discuss today with two wonderful experts who will share their expertise on these topics and these questions on music and algorithms. And before we dive into the discussion, it's good to know that if you have questions at home, you can type them in the chat or send them in via questions@impact.nl. And then we'll make sure to address these questions also in the show. I'm very delighted to introduce our first speaker of today, Wilbert Mutsaers. Since 2017, Wilbert Mutsaers is the head of Spotify Benelux. Before starting his position at Spotify, Mitsarz was the CEO of Mojo Concerts, which is the largest live music company in the Netherlands. He also worked as the station manager of 3FM and FunX, where he also, amongst others, was responsible for the music, marketing and online strategy, as well as 7 years of the Serious Request annual fundraising campaign. Mutsaers has an academic degree in communication science, and he has been the creative and marketing director at Universal Music Netherlands and at Sony Music Benelux. He's also the co-founder and first chairman of the Dutch Pop Coalition and a member of the Dutch Creative Council. Nice to know also is that Wilbert started his working life as an academic researcher and teacher of communication sciences at Radboud University. Welcome, Wilbert.
Thank you. That was a lot.
It was a lot. Well, I'm going to be a little bit shorter. Sorry, Christine. Christina Bauer, Dr. Christina Bauer, is still a researcher at university, assistant professor at Utrecht University, where your research centers on interactive intelligence systems. It says that you take a human-centered approach because technology follows what humans and society need, right?
Yes.
And it is very particular for this show that you have a particular expertise in context-aware recommendation systems, music. What does this actually mean?
Context-aware recommender systems or music?
No, context-aware
recommender systems. It means systems that recommend items or information that fit the preferences of users, and context awareness means that it's also aware of other things than just preferences. Could also be it's early in the day, where you are at the moment, or other environmental factors.
Okay. Thanks for this clarification. That's good to know.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let's start.
All right.
When it comes to algorithms and music, I think there's a lot of assumptions, also perhaps some myths and stories that go around. And that has to do with the fact that algorithms are often black boxed, but also that the music industry to a large extent is black boxed. It's something that not everybody really knows the insights about. And today we aim to open that black box a little bit and get to know more about how the music industry works and also what the role of algorithms is in that. And we would like to start with a few assumptions, questions that are out there when it comes to the role of algorithms in music. And let's start, I think, by the question of the streaming platforms and playlists, because there's a lot of discussion about algorithms influencing playlists, yes or no. Wilbert, how big is the influence of the algorithm on these playlists? And are all playlists made by algorithms, or is that really a false assumption?
That's a totally false assumption. Yeah. Actually, there's just, and I can only speak for Spotify, obviously. There's actually free playlists that are really algorithmic, or we would say personalized, because algorithm is like such a container, concept. But that's the Discover Weekly, which everyone gets an own one, Release Radar, and daily mixes, and those are really pick for you, especially for you. And all the other Spotify playlists are curated or edited by our editors, which we have a couple hundred of them. And so that's a big misconception. Yeah, it's always in articles people are talking about algorithm, and we are like, well, we just people and making those playlists.
These hundreds curators are all working for Spotify Benelux, or this is Spotify?
No, we have a global team, and then we have dedicated editors, or we call them editors, for regions. Or some might just work on a genre or a subgenre, or And what you get if you talk about if you look at your homepage of Spotify, there's much more personalization going on. So not so much in the playlist itself, but in the playlist you got offered, and they are depending on what you've been listening to, or people like you have been listening to. And that's a process that we've been in for I think 2.5 years, sort of. So it's very recent, actually, for a company that's still very young, but it's 11, 12 years in the Netherlands now. And the company is in total 15 years. So let's not forget, how early days everything is. Mm-hmm.
And then might this also explain that it's still in its early days, that there's a lot of misconceptions about that the programming is being done by algorithms, because it was something new, it was something that was streamed, and a lot of things happening on the internet. I'm actually having this open for the Google Doc to have questions, which is also internet. That a lot of people do not dive into the technologies behind their services online, and then they just say, it's algorithms and I don't want to know about it.
Yeah, I think that's okay, because in essence, Spotify is, let's say, a convenience app. So we don't, it's not necessary for people to dive into the technique, but I think because it's still pretty recent, it's also because people don't know. They might think but to be precise, for instance, until I think 2015, we didn't even have playlists. And people kind of seem to have forgotten that, but that's 6 years ago. We were trial and error, or it's not just me, because I started in 2017, so I wasn't even there. But now working at Spotify for 4.5 or almost 5 years, that's long. It's in terms of how the company and the developments we are going through, it's a long time, but it's actually really brief. And I could imagine if you're a user or a listener, or how you label yourself, you're not aware of that, because you don't look at other people's Spotify's, do you? So you just look at what you get, and you don't know. So sometimes when I'm in a college or something, I just ask everyone in the room, take out your phone, open Spotify, and then they find out huh? Oh,
yours is different.
Totally different, yeah.
And then same question for you, Christine, maybe on this mystification of algorithms, or the glorification of algorithms, and that they are all over important for anything happening on the web. Is this something that you encounter a lot in research?
In research, so doing different kinds of research, and also doing interviews with users and artists, and it was very interesting to hear about the playlists, because in interviews with artists from different fields, it came across they think the most algorithmic thing that happens is the playlists, and it's very important to their own songs are on the playlists, and then the algorithm picks up everything. So that was the conception that we got from the interviews, and that's very interesting, because apparently that's not the case at all. My other stance on that is not based on research, but also from the media. It's frequently streaming platforms and algorithms, when some things on the media is always put into one together. And as you said before, should we say algorithm in general, personalization, and when it's always tied together and in articles brought together, then people think everything on the platform is algorithmic and knows everything about me. And that's that's not the case.
That's a misconception.
Yeah, that's a misconception.
And so when it comes to these personalized suggestions that have to do with algorithms, what kind of information is important for an algorithm to generate that?
Well, what Spotify does, you know it better than I do, because from outside it's a black box. But with personalization, it depends what you want to do and what you can do. So learning about preferences could be based on the listening behavior, on what someone is clicking, how they navigate through the system. But there are also other ways to asking questions like, what's your favorite genre? And then you know about, or the system can learn from that. If you say my favorite genre is country, but it's not your favorite genre, then the personalization goes in the wrong direction, but it would be based or tied to this.
I'm going to have a lot of nerdy questions. I'm not on Spotify myself. So imagine that I would be saying country is my favorite music, and I actually only listen to, what would be the other side? Let's say very urban music made only in Marseille.
Okay.
Then what goes wrong in the system?
I wouldn't know, frankly, because I'm not an expert on the technique side of things, but what I do know is that we have acquired, we developed our onboarding, which is an important part of when you get, on board and you start listening or using Spotify. So we have more precise options for people to say, well, I like this or like that. But you don't have to do it. You can skip it either. You can think, well, I don't want to do that. But if a wild guess, probably is that this onboarding is meant to give you a good user experience. But if you're going to listen to something completely different, you're going to skip all those first suggestions probably. And in the course of time, it will learn from you and people like you. Because you're probably not the only one who's doing that, or might not. Which is always interesting, because obviously people think or they do have their own preferences or experiences, but it's like there's like a lot of you having the same individual, unique preferences. So it has to do, and the more users we get, the more learning we have, and a lot of those things are just correlation. Frankly, it's math. It's and people like me would look like it from the content point of view, like, is this making sense? But I guess that a lot of our algos are working, it's not one algorithm, it's like a lot of input, and and I think to be precise, because you were saying about suggestions, but I don't know exactly what you mean by that, because mostly people listen to music they already know, so they find it themselves, or they make playlists themselves, or they use a lot our playlists because they're on the homepage, and that's like the vast majority of all the listening volume. So the suggestion part is more maybe on the playlist you get suggested, but not so much on the tracks you get suggested.
Yeah, but you have to think like the number radio, for example, nummerradio. Is it where you start listening to tunes and then it just suggests things that you might also like?
And that's if you go to number radio, that's totally correlative. And it probably makes sense like constantly to you. Yeah. Because it's math. It's like, so and then,
because I see Christina wants to jump on the word correlations. I think this was what triggered you.
Yeah, we have many things to say. So the one part is also when you have a playlist, then there is the possibility that it continues playing.
Autoplay,
yes, autoplay, and that's algorithmic approaches. But with correlation,
not necessarily.
Not necessary. The other part is like there are a lot of people that are similar to you, and that's the basis of what's called collaborative filtering. That I call it the system watches out for people that are similar taste to you, listen to the similar or the same tracks, and based on that, what like a person listens to additionally is then suggested to the other person. So that's a very generic, basic way of of personalization, so learning from others that are similar.
I think that's the first question, if I may.
Yes, okay.
Already coming in from Laura Erdima via YouTube, and she says, how is it possible that the curators know what genre to use per song? Are they just making up genres? Is there an endless list of genres? And how can listeners find out?
Artists, when they onboard their tracks or pitch the tracks in our tools, they get to choose whatever they want. So
they can do country and hip hop from Marseille if that.
Well, if they think their song is both country and hip hop, you know, you could give it market, and you could even say, well, we're playing piano or tambourine or whatever, and people tend to do that correctly, because otherwise, you know, it doesn't really help the editors, and you know, the originating country or. Yeah, I think we asked something like, what is the genre you most feel related to? And then we have like big genres, and we have totally a ton of subgenres and mini genres, and if some artists keep on saying would say like, well, I can't find my genre, we would create a new one. So you just want to make sure that artists or creators think like, yeah. This is where we kind of feel comfortable. That's where we see ourselves in that space. So it's not what we do. It's the artists themselves.
You just mentioned that math play quite an important role in these algorithms and how they work. Is math and data something that the human curators of playlists also look at?
Yeah, we definitely look at data because it depends on the hypothesis behind the playlist. These could be totally different from each other. So, for instance, tomorrow it's Friday, and then we have New Music Friday. Mm-hmm. I was just finishing it before writing there, and then I'm going to check before midnight, and then it's this playlist. The theory behind it, we serve everyone the same playlist, saying, well, these are the tracks that we think might be interesting that you know of. Not that you like them, but that you know of. So that could be newsworthy, it could be anything. Well, I'm not going to give examples because then it's out there already. But then we have other playlists, like let's say Coffee House, which is more about background music, mood, easy listening. And then it's very important to see for us what, if people use it, what the data tell us about how they use it. So a New Music Friday skip rate is going to be very high because people skip, like checking songs, which is cool. So we have like different tools or different assumptions behind playlists, so that they differ like totally. And the length of the listening session or, well, those kind of things we check because it's not a test. It's not like when I used to work at radio, there was like a music test, and then we asked like 2,000 people, I think, whether they could listen to like an intro and a chorus, and then they say, well, I like it, I don't like it, and I was like, yeah, well, okay. And then if I didn't like the result, I just ignored it. He said like, no, yeah, but they have to get used to it. So we just did it anyway. But on Spotify, it's so many people using it, you can't say, well, no, I still think they do like it, when data says they don't. But then still you could think like, okay, but maybe this track would fit better in another playlist or in another space where people are more discovery oriented or...
Just checking, if you say so many people use it, how many people in Benelux are using Spotify?
Well, we don't give that exact number. We don't give numbers on local level, but it's like really a lot. It's millions of people, yeah. And I think worldwide we're now on, I think, 370 million, something like that. And Benelux is very streaming oriented.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. So then maybe to another misconception
Yes.
that is out there a lot. Because of course, Spotify as a streaming service is also repeating what is happening in the world in general. Now, if there's a lot of attention for, let's say, Madonna in all media, Madonna is going to be popular on Spotify.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there has been complaints that Spotify is very good for the big names in the music industry and not very kind to smaller artists that are just starting to operate in the music industry. Would you agree on this, or do you think that is just a repetition from people that don't know what is happening with Spotify?
Well, this is not something that I hear a lot, to be frank, and it's a little bit semantics, because if an artist is big, people listen to it. It's not like a result, it's like by definition. So that's one. If you talk about numbers, it's not true. It's I think that last year it was around 60,000 artists making up 90% of our streaming volume. And, well, think about that, 60,000 artists, that's, so, and there are a few big stars, which has always been the case, but our strategy from an editorial perspective will be what we call, well, it's not, but we call it breaking the pyramid. We would say that if you look to the artists in terms of streaming volume or popularity, let's say Ed Sheeran is in the top, Drake, and and down there below is my nephew, making his stuff tonight, whatever. And then we think it's important and interesting on the artist side, but also on the user side, that we try to break the pyramids to make it flatter, and the only way we can do that is by pushing up artists that are in the midsection and give them place in new. So last year I think there were like 75,000 artists that were playlisted the first time in their career, and these are really big numbers. So and that makes sense, because the names I just dropped, like Ed Sheeran or Drake, they were not known like 20 years ago. They also started. Yeah. So if you want to be vital and give people, because in essence you would say we want to give people what they want, but when it comes to music, sometimes people don't really know.
And here is a question that came in, and it's exactly on this point.
Yeah.
What if the artists also don't know and they tick the wrong box for their music, so they end up in the wrong playlist and nobody is ever
No, but it doesn't work like you say, I'm this young, and then you get into a playlist, because we listen to the music. So, and then we tag it for our area or whatever, and then we put it in baskets, what we call, and then we check. And then we think, okay, we're going to update this playlist. What do we hit this week on? Or what did we see in other territories? And then it doesn't matter if someone hasn't switched on a genre, it's fine.
Okay. So Laura, that was your question. It's being answered. For you as a researcher, sorry?
Yeah.
No, I wanted to ask Christine to respond to.
Yeah, there are some things I want to say something about. So we have this popularity curve with some that are the top of the top superstars, also worldwide, and then it's a very steep curve going down, and you feel like it's already not popular at all, but it's still very popular. And then we have this long tail in the distribution of comparingly less popular artists. And the idea was, once everybody has access to everything, when we have the streaming platforms, this will immediately flatten the things, and everybody can listen also to those that are less popular. But data shows that's not really changing a lot. So still the top of the tops are top of the... So there is still this gap in popularity. No. Maybe not in the Spotify platform, but what outside in the data that's still there in listening events.
Yeah, that's difficult to discuss, because that's the essence of what we do is, and also like the back catalog and stuff is being listened to much more, and people listen to many more artists than they did before, because for the simple reason they can.
I'm not saying it's not happening at all, but still there is this large gap, which makes sense that it's still there.
I wouldn't call it a gap, because there is a part of an audience, which has always been the case from the early days, from the rise of pop music. They are just interested in hits. That's one, and these are by definition big artists, and they could, so the top 50 still has 50 tracks in there. So a lot of things on that side are what they are. And on the other hand, there's like because of streaming, I think access to music or to people has been democratized. It's very easy to get, on our platform. You can promote it yourself, and that's what happens, And a lot of music that we find our way via streaming are not on radio or on other media. So if you look at the bigger picture, it's and the other thing is we've seen a complete rise of the number of artists. It's like there's so many more artists nowadays than there used to be.
But that's the thing, that data suggests that, there are lots of more artists, and there are also, if you search as a user, from the user perspective, if you search for them and know what you're looking for, you can find them. And before you couldn't, because there was no access if the CD was not in the store. But the thing is, you have to know what to look for, and people search for artists because they were on the radio and TV, or were suggested by a friend. And then also, and you have that also on Spotify, when you listen to an artist, you go to the artist page, it says similar artists. And this is a way how to navigate from one artist to another artist, to learn about new artists.
Not really. The percentage of people on artist page going to other artists is very low.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I hear something perhaps interesting here, because you're saying people search themselves on an active word, so that's a very active thing to do. Could algorithms perhaps also play a role in making new suggestions?
Like in a passive,
more passive way to help you discover new things.
That's the one thing that I mentioned before, is when playlist is continued, for instance, or whatever shows up on the first page. And there's not only Spotify out there, there was other platforms that have different versions of different services on the first page. And of course, what pops up gets attention compared to something that's not shown. That's rather apparent. And that's where when it's algorithm-based, algorithms play an important role, because who's shown, which band, which artist is shown then to which user, and that has an impact on what people listen to.
But mostly I can only talk about Spotify. There are no artists shown, there are playlists shown.
Yeah.
And in the playlist, the idea is that we mix, depending on what kind of playlist it is like, if, let's say, for instance, Ed Sheeran is the most popular artist.
Yeah.
He was in the country today, so that's why I'm talking about Ed Sheeran.
Yeah.
But it's just, any name could be there. We know from research and from even in the past that even if you're the biggest fan of Ed Sheeran, at one point you get sick and tired of Ed Sheeran. So if he's in every playlist. Even if you are a fan, it's like having dinner. If you have like your favorite food, but you have it like every day, you don't want it after a while. So we know for a fact that, and it changes, and it's some people, what we call appetite for discovery. For some people, it's like very big, and others not so, and which is fine. So we and then there's something in the middle where we can maybe check and see what people might like or might not like, and the good thing is, and the whole system, let's say the ecosystem of music with labels and independents is like, they're releasing new music, and so a lot of our work gets into playlisting new music by definition.
And here, I think it's a question that came in. It's from Pim Hutchins. And he wrote, I see a lot of playlists indeed on my home, with a capital home, but I'm wondering why there are so little to be found on Spotify home on artists that I follow. So I think here's a gap between what he is following himself and what appears on his Spotify home. There used to be a list of albums that have just been released, but this worthy information is gone, unfortunately.
No, it's not. It's
can I just finish?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
It seems that Spotify likes to decide what to offer me instead of giving me control over what I will find on my home. I don't know how you put it like this. How do you look at this? So I think if you are talking about the appetite for discovery, you can, of course, help people discover more, or you can then confirm them in what they like already.
Yeah, but here this is just talking about misconceptions. because you have the clock on your homepage where when it turns blue, there's new releases you like, so you'll find them, and the new releases have just shifted to the next page on search, where there's like new releases. So it's not gone at all; it's still there. Actually, people in my team are, as we are talking now, are scheduling the new releases for tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's not gone; it's still there.
Okay, Pim, look on the blue button.
You know where to find it now.
There we are.
I think what we also hear in the discussions now is that there streaming platforms introduce new user experiences, new ways for artists to put their music online. But of course, it's also still the music industry that operates in certain ways. What I'm interested in is the role of music labels and how the power of music labels perhaps has shifted or not with the introduction of streaming services. What do you think has that become less or not?
Well, I'm interested in what you think.
Yeah.
What I think, well, it's not what I think or what I know. Well, there's 3 big labels, and we know that shareholders of Spotify are
No, they're not.
not anymore. Or what's? Is this a misconception that they have ever been involved?
They were in the beginning.
Yes. But that's
not anymore.
like, But I just say that they were involved, not in the very moment.
I wasn't there when it was founded. Obviously, they needed. When Spotify was founded, I don't think anyone really thought it was going to succeed because of the piracy momentum going on, and it's not. I don't think it's by incident that it happened in Sweden, because there were like other people trying it in America, in California, and then the labels were not really, willing to do so. And then in a country like Sweden, which is pretty comparable to the Netherlands when it came to piracy and the drop of the music industry, in 2006 there were just some people say, well, probably young people are never going to pay for music again, ever again. But let's try this. And then the idea was, let's have the labels be part of it. Let's do the experiment and see what happens.
But why do you then say, I'm wrong? I just say that there is a connection between labels and Spotify, and they're part of the game of the music.
No, but you say you were
ecosystem.
Shareholders. That's what I reacted to. But they're not.
No, not. Yes.
No, but already a long time. They're not.
Yes, but I'm not saying in the very moment, because I don't know what's going on in the very moment. So there are some connections. Because, like, without music, you couldn't exist.
But it goes for all the music. It's not.
And and then there are lots of like other labels, independent labels, where I don't know if there's a connection. I think that not, but I don't know. What do you mean by a
connection? Maybe I misunderstand.
Let's unpack. No, if there's a connection there must be a connection if you want to upload, because this is impossible to do without a connection. But are there, let's say, bigger record labels that are also having a say in what you need to be promoting? Because of course this is the misconception that we don't talk about.
I was not talking about this thing.
That's maybe what I was reacting to, because for us it doesn't matter on what label or independent track is released. Actually, if we look in the system, it's like hidden. We can look it up, but we don't look at it, because we just make the playlist, the C data, and that's what we work from. And there is I think there's a trend going on, is that because a lot of artists find out, and their managers, that for some things they might need a label, but for a lot of things they don't, that we see that many more independent artists, which is actually a lot of extra work for my team, and that's fine. I think you don't need a connection, because you can upload your music and that's it. So, and that's how we work. So our editors, that's why they're called editors. They're not like people following the orders. It's like you're an independent editor. We don't even have international priorities or whatever, which you always have when you work at a label. It's very clear, these are the things that we're working on. For us, it's not.
So then, Christina, maybe it's good to explain why you think that these misconceptions do exist.
I think I'm in the middle of a misconception, because I don't know what's going on at the very moment. The question was, if I understood it right, how the music industry, like who's involved and how this changed with the existence of streaming services. And you mentioned one part that, for instance, artists, or if they have a small, I say connected with a small label, if they're a small label, they can contribute this directly or via, I call them aggregators, via companies that or organizations that do that for them. So having this interface to the platform, but there's also the possibility for artists to go via the big three record companies, which is of course not hello, I'm here and do this. That works like the old processes that were out there. So what changed in the music industry? Like first of all, there are these aggregators because they didn't exist beforehand, and the streaming platforms are new to the music ecosystem because they didn't exist before. And from my personal observations, so that's not research, I have the impression that there are far more really small independent labels, but that could be wrong, so it's just my impression. But also like artists on their own uploading things.
And I think maybe to conclude this little part of the discussion, that when, of course, there was a promise of internet to be the people's platform, and that we would all be equal in uploading, downloading, and sharing what we were doing. But of course, it turns out that over the years of internet growing up or growing rotten, depends on your point of view, it is copying the power structures that are there in the existing world. So then, of course, there are also structures within streaming services that are good for the bigger companies, and that might be less good for smaller companies. But the thing with Spotify is, if I understood well, everybody can upload directly. So this is the
directly via aggregators or distributors, but it has to do with the metadata and the royalty accounting, just to make sure. It's totally different from, let's say, YouTube, where you have user-generated content, and so it's different, totally different. On that part, it's totally different situation.
Then on this, because of course we're also looking towards the future, question coming in from Arjen Dunnewind. How do you see the future of Spotify develop? Will it be much more on a editor-based programming, or will it be much more what you call aggregated correlations programming?
I think both, because it still has been, as we see, like many things that we're testing and see what happens, is that in the end it's music. So it's not just notes and lyrics. It's also like, what's the context? And I think that's where we need editors for, and for a fact, we want to talk with artists and their representatives. So. That's also something different, because we have like other stuff going on, let's say, off-platform live shows, for instance, or merchandise, or you want to sell vinyl via Spotify, which happens more and more, so interesting. So probably it will go hand in hand, and I guess it will depend on what kind of user you are, what kind of music you like, or what kind of artist you are. On the other hand, is that what works best. And it's still early days. It's, that's why we call it tests.
Yeah.
We have a lot of tests that kind of fail. And that's good, because then we know, okay, this doesn't work, or this does not yet work, or we had a whole wrong idea, or whatever.
I'm going to ask the same question to Christina. Imagine that Spotify would be focusing a lot more on the editors. What could Spotify look like in 10 years, and it would be different if they would rely on aggregated correlations? I am wondering that it's indeed, as you say, that's really a lot of editorial content and not so much algorithms, because there's lots of research going on in the field and trying to push things forward. When there's this focus on this editorial part, then I wonder, is anything different to, as it has been before, to the radio, where someone's editing things and putting it on air and people listen to that? So then there is lots of responsibility still with the editors.
but I wonder how this fits together with personalization, because we're, as users, like consumers, we used to get things personalized over time. And so with the focus on editorial content, which would mean less personalization, I wonder how people would react on that. If that fits the expectations.
That's not how it works. Editorial is not personalized, because the playlist gets suggested to people that might like this music. So that's.
Yeah, but then the playlist is.
But it's
recommended.
It's totally different from radio, where you can just play one track at a time. So if you work at a radio station, you, let's say, a very discovery-like radio station would add 5 or 6 songs a week on a playlist, max. And we do like every genre, every music is being playlisted.
If there is a personalization, then it's not done by the 200 editors worldwide for everyone. So then a package, a playlist which has a package of songs in them is then algorithmically suggested, recommended, shown to specific people based on their taste.
But if music is not listened to, we don't have data. So you need editors to give the tracks a first chance. And that's why I said, like, last year we had 75,000 new artists being playlisted. So in terms of music, that's like incredibly a lot.
Yeah.
So if you would compare to, let's say, TV series, then let's say a couple of hundred new TV series is a lot. You can't even handle that as a watcher. In music, it's like we have 40 to 100,000 new tracks a day. So there's definitely a lot of music on platforms that's not being listened to at all.
You just mentioned also the difference with platforms like Spotify and the radio, and sort of differences between that. I think one of the differences is also that now everybody can see sort of the streams, right? So I also see that some of the artists are even mentioning how many streams they have in their songs, and it becomes a whole thing in itself. Is this something that you recognize, this obsession with streams for artists?
No, I think it depends on genre. It always has been, you know. Back in the day, still there are like the old-fashioned awards, like the gold record or the platinum record, and I think it's up to every artist individually if you think that's important or not. You know, you could just make music just for art's sake and don't care how many people listen to it. If you don't, and at the other end, there's people making music just thinking about how can we get as much streams as possible, and then most of the artists are somewhere in between there. And by genre, there's like, you know, if you're an alternative indie band, you probably wouldn't be on your socials like, we have, but that's like, you know, that's maybe, you know, I've worked a lot in music, so I think they might still think like, but they would not be, maybe not be so proud of it as someone in another genre saying, well, you know, this is really an achievement.
So then maybe to get back to what was changing in music industry with the arrival of streaming platforms, we talked shortly about the uploading part where musicians via aggregated platforms can do this. And for consumers, because what stuck with me was this appetite for discovery. I'm one of those nerds that goes into record stores all over. And I'm very fond of the one guy in the record store in the little village I grew up in that was suggesting things to me. And then the appetite for discovery is something that you can cultivate, no? Because if you get something that you have an acquired taste, it grows in you that you can discover more things. And I think a few of your remarks touch on that. It seems like there's less appetite for discovery with the pyramid or the curve, as you mentioned, whereas Wilbert said that you are trying to flatten the pyramid. So if we're talking about the appetite for discovery, are we now looking at the platforms, whereas maybe we should be educating the listeners a bit more? And how can we do so? How can we do so as researchers, and how can we do so as streaming platforms?
Well, in research, you can't educate people. We first have to investigate what's going on, what people are doing. Personally, I think it's a good path to like trying to flatten this curve. And as you said, there's And there's research on that. Some people really discovery oriented, and if there's something like several songs and that they're familiar to them, then they're really bored. And for others, if there's something they're not so familiar with, then they're like, whoa, what's going on there? So that's very person dependent, what the preferences are. But I think a chance, especially when you can reach out to lots of users, is to like trying to widen their space. So
let's do a hypothetical trick. You could be in the editor seat for 1 hour at Spotify and you would know how the platform works. What would be your trick?
What would be my, if I had the solution, like maybe Spotify would pay lots of money for that, giving the trick, but I don't know.
Okay, that's a pity. I was just thinking about putting my music online too. And for you, same question. You have the editor role, and you were saying it's going to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Also, we learned that what in the old days used to be called the selector grows more important, and that there's curators that you can really trust. But as far as I know, the editors with Spotify are anonymous, no? So you cannot follow somebody that's a trustworthy person.
Yeah, well, I think the whole thing, in essence, has to do with trust. If you would go to the record store and you get good suggestions, you kind of trust the person who's suggesting you. Well, maybe you should have a listen to this or that. Yeah. And if you go home every week with stuff and you go and you listen, he or she was right, then it's cool. Radio is more or less the same. It's like, well, on this radio show, I always hear new stuff that I like. Most of the time, the DJ didn't select the music. It's like the editorial team. But anyway, in the conception of the audience, it's the DJ. When streaming, it's more like in the back of your head, if you keep on going back to playlists that are updated constantly, so you could listen constantly to the same playlist where you got new tracks. Probably you trust this playlist. Yeah. So the paradox or the contradiction has a lot been posed. And, I am from radio, so I always listen to it like, but it's not that simple. It's not like human or people. Is not the case. I think it's a romantic idea. I love that. I was from there, and I still like radio. Like, there's a human telling you. But actually, most playlists you listen to are also compilable humans. But apparently, it doesn't really matter to the listener as long as they get like satisfaction or they want discovery. So tomorrow, for instance, you have the New Music Friday, which is literally like editorial work, but at the same time you get your release radar, and that's like totally personalized for you. So you can switch. And I don't think people are aware, to be honest. Yeah,
as you said before, so this first misconception. So people think everything, like generalized. People think everything is algorithmically curated, and then there is a sentiment attached to that.
Yeah. And to maybe to add, if there's time, that we also have playlists with a very large pool of tracks, let's say 500 tracks, and then maybe you get a little bit more Ed Sheeran than you, because so that's also like stuff in between. It's like the human machine learning.
That's the question on this. It's from Casa Mariposa. What a beautiful name. It's a true name. And the question is, how important are moods playlists for Spotify? Is these the list where you can use artificial intelligence to discover what kind of mood listeners are in and then feed on them? It's a question by, House of the Butterfly.
What's important to us is that we want to offer people what they want. So if you just want to listen to rain all day, there's probably playlists, rain sounds or whatever. So if it's not there, so we have like, what's very interesting to us is not only to see what has already been consumed, because that's interesting, but more interesting is to see what people search for. So what people search for, that gives us like a lot of insights on, and if they have like missed searches, like everyone's trying to find this genre or the artist or this theme or this whatever season, and we think like, it's like, they all want to listen to Sunset Ibiza music forever. I just make it up. and if we would not have a playlist for that, we would create one. And I think we're still in the stages that we still have those content gaps. I think if we would look back on it, let's say 10 years from now, look back to now, I think even I would probably smile and think like, yeah, we didn't know half of what we do now, because we were just kind of experimenting and finding out. And we found out that for some people, meditating or doing yoga is like totally different than from, on your bike going to school and listen to the latest hip hop or whatever. It's like, it's an audio experience, to say it ugly, but it's like a totally different thing.
Yeah. So when you say, I think I'm looking at the clock, we have 10 minutes only. If we look at that, we are at the beginning of a certain development. There have been surprises in the past, and of course the most fun thing would be to think about what could be surprising us in the future when we talk about streaming platforms. And what is one thing that has struck you a lot after the arrival of streaming service? And the same question for you, Wilbert.
Me first? Okay.
Yes.
Well, what I find very interesting is that on a global perspective, for me, and that's very personal, it's very interesting to see that in, let's say, the traditional music, let's say the 90s, zeros, it was all about Western Europe and US, UK, and that kind of, because we know, obviously, we all know that music is popular, like everywhere, but there was not like really infrastructure, or we couldn't reach the people or whatever, you can imagine why. But nowadays, with streaming, it's like, there's more people listening in Mexico City to some artists, because there live like more people in Mexico City than in the whole of Netherlands. And now it's interesting also for the artists or the other way around. I think today this week we have a number one artist from Puerto Rico. And we have that constantly artists from areas that, we were, and there were probably, let's go in the time machine and say in the 80s or 90s, there were artists very popular in Puerto Rico as well, but we just were not that aware, or the label structure was not like really working on it. Like, yeah, we know it's interesting, but nobody pays for it or whatever, and so let's work on the new U2 or the new Madonna or new Prince. And I think and now it's both. It's like happening, and so the structure follows actually the new reality, like labels or manager or artist thinking like, yeah, it doesn't even matter, if I'm from Argentina or if I just come up with something, you have a different situation than you had like 10 years ago. Totally different.
Okay.
Mine is related and totally different at the same time. So it's more the surprise is that something didn't happen, what was expected. So with having access to lots of different music from all over the world, and everybody can like upload their own thing. The expectation was that like you upload your thing and everybody can listen to it. But then it was really soon that we found out as human beings we are overwhelmed and we don't know what to do and how to find all the things that are out there. And then like from the artist perspective, also like I can upload that my songs and everybody can listen to it, but nobody did, or not a lot of people did. So there's still a lot of different channels are needed to promote your own work, and it may happen for some that it goes via the streaming platform. But as I could hear in interviews with artists, they really feel at least that they have to do a lot of promotion via various different channels, as they had to do it before, so that they can also be successful on the streaming platform.
And when it comes to this differentiation, I'm also interested in your research specifically on gender equality in music. Could you tell us a bit more on that and how
on
happening there?
Recent research, so we reached out to artists and we learned from them that, without asking them directly, that they're concerned with like the gender imbalance in the music industry in general, which exists for ages, and that they thought, well, it would be cool if now with the algorithms that this could be a thing to change the world, like that they can give the impulse that we can reach gender balance at some point. So we looked on the open data that we had and looked how is the distribution, are they really right what they're saying, and well, it's reflected also by other research that gender-wise roughly 25% are female, depending how you categorize things. And then we looked on common collaborative filtering approach, how things would develop when recommendations are given, and we assumed that the top tracks that are recommended are indeed listened to, and how this would develop, and we could see it was iterated. So also over several rounds in the simulation, it kept this 25%. So we couldn't see that the algorithm would change the thing, so we tried to tweak a bit on the algorithm to recommend more female artists in this case, and looked on how would this develop with the algorithm, and over time with the simulation. And in the simulation, it indeed showed that it could be a possibility that the algorithm could help to reach gender balance over time, because it would change people's behavior, and the algorithm would pick this new behavior up. And that's really, I think that's very promising. And of course, it's a different story how it would look like in real life.
Because then this is a look into the machine of a streaming service. No, would a streaming service, as for example Spotify, be able to implement this algorithm in the machinery of Spotify?
Well, I can't implement it at the platforms. We, as researchers in academia, we can only show what could happen. But of course, people that are or organizations that are reach out to people that have the opportunity to look into that in detail.
Yeah, I think if I may add, is that we put a lot of effort in working. Actually, the program that we label it is called Equal. On balance is well, in artists, it's depending on how you count. Indeed, let's say somewhere between 20 and 25%. That's the reality. It's that's not us making that up. That's what it is. But at the same time, if you look behind even the artists, the percentages are even way lower. If you look at managements or producers or songwriters or engineers, or it's getting scary. It's 4%, 3%. So we have programs even with studios now, like giving women the opportunity to for free use our studios to become an engineer or stuff like that. And on the Equal program, we try, we do a lot of, it's actually a lot of marketing and PR on it as well. Last week we had a Dutch artist presented on Times Square just saying, this is equal, and, we want that. And I think that the last physical masterclass that we did in the Netherlands was February last year, just before the lockdown. And it was all female. I was the only guy in the room. All female masterclass, and actually there were, I think, about 80 female Dutch artists, and they all showed up, and they were all so that was for me and my team was it's we can't change, we shouldn't think that we have this power, but we could at least facilitate and enable and make sure that that's not being perceived as some bastion you never could, walk into. And I have good faith, and also seen the genres that have been developing that, and this is like a society, it's like a bigger thing, that even if we could just attribute a little bit to that would be great. We know obviously that people don't necessarily listen to music, or if it's female or male, so that would, that's. But on the other hand, I know from my radio days that nobody knew, but I told my music team 1 out of 3 records has to be female. It gives a better listening experience, and or also important local music. Give them an opportunity, but it's not like a black and white kind of simple thing you could just pin down. And I think I think we've just started, and we'll see. We see a lot of interesting things going on in music. Also in the way it's organized, and that I think that will have positive effects on how people would perceive they could, pursue a career in music, like not being judged on being this or that or being from there or there, because you're not totally dependent anymore on those structures. So,
Here,
sorry, I'm a little bit talking too much.
that's one question.
But I really think it's really important.
Yeah. There is let's say, the falling away of the middleman, we might say, no? There's a few giant companies remaining also in music industry, and a lot of individual artists trying to find a way and finding out that they need marketing to get their music listened to. And here's a question by Ruud Arinko, who is asking, is the problem not that Spotify, as other tech giants, has gathered a massive amount of data about users that they can monetize in the future? And she's fearing, or he is fearing, that hence you are experimenting with playlists, how to monetize much more in the future. There's a lot of questions.
Yeah, I don't know what the question is.
No, the question is, are you experimenting now to make more money in future? So that you have test runs on how to program lists?
People just pay a fixed amount of money per month, so I don't know how that would look like then.
I don't know.
Maybe I don't understand the question. No, apparently then it's not on my radar. We're mostly experimenting on get the things right in terms of, are people enjoying or get whatever their motivation is, what they can do. If they open the app, can they find what they want or get suggestions maybe that they like? And if not, we're doing our job not well, or just something magical happened that people just start disliking music, which is not going to happen. So I think that's the whole idea. And I think what in the phase that streaming in general now is like, unlock the world, is trying to find, people that couldn't go to a record store before or whatever, that just a phone is like. In a lot of places in the world, it's like a normal thing, and that creates a lot of opportunities. I don't know what. I haven't invented Spotify. I'm very happy to work there. I love the company, but it's not like some sort of 20 years kind of plan going on, because that's not possible. You could philosophize about it, but I don't think. To be honest, and maybe to conclude, I don't know, because the way you look, is that I think even the founders could not have imagined in 2006 if they would ask, well, in 15 years from now, what would Spotify look like? I think they would not guess it, probably. No.
Well, we clearly have still a lot to discuss, but we clearly are also at the end, I think, of today's episode of IMPAKT TV. I think we have to close off now.
I'm going to say sorry to all the people that have sent in questions. Maybe a next talk. We can just ask you again, so you can come in again and actually do all the questions. But the next talk show has actually already been planned, no?
Yes. The next episode of IMPAKT TV will be part of and we have the folders here, the flyers here, of the IMPAKT Festival on Modern Love, and that will be in November. And if you have still questions, what you can do is go to the rooftop bar to have discussions there with other participants and other people who watch.
It's not a real bar, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a digital bar. It's a digital bar, but we can go.
That's it.
And for now, I would really like to thank the wonderful speakers, Christine, Wilbert, for joining us today. I learned a lot, and I think, it's interesting to see how these streaming platforms will develop also in the future. I think there's a lot of things that we cannot even expect right now, how it will look like. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you at the next IMPAKT TV episode. Oh.